I've thought about making a podcast for a long time. I really appreciate the format, a long, uninterrupted essay spoken in the voice of the author. I've even sat down to record a podcast on several occasions in the past. Yet every time I've had the same issue. I get through the recording, I start listening, and then think, who's going to listen to this? No one cares. But considering the state of my channel, and thanks to a few consistent commenters on my videos, I finally feel like this time it's worth doing. I don't think there's any better topic for the first episode than who am I? What is my YouTube channel? And what's the deal with my content being kind of all over the place? Well, long story long, I started making videos when I was 11. I had one of those flip cameras. If you don't know what that is, you can Google it. And I used it to shoot stupid, silly videos with my buddy, also named James. Instead of writing a script, we would just come up with what happens next as we filmed, and then I would put it all together in Windows Movie Maker. The thing that always amazed me was how I could be a terrible actor, shoot it equally terribly, and then after putting it all together, it was still fun to watch. So I kept doing it. In fact, a lot of those videos are still out there somewhere, and I'm not going to bother linking them, but if you look for them, I'm sure you'll find them. Partway through middle school, I had a teacher who put on a film about great civilizations of the world. One of them was about China. I don't remember almost anything about it other than there being a scene where they show a toddler with pants on that had a slit in the bottom for him to squat, and that was what they did instead of using diapers. Who knew what kind of impact that would have on me? When I graduated middle school, the same year my brother graduated high school, as a gift, my parents planned a family trip to China. My parents had always wanted to see the Great Wall and the Terracotta Warriors, and they thought it would be a great experience for their kids as well. Being only 13 and having no experience of the world at the time, I didn't really have a full appreciation for what I was seeing, but it still left an impact. I distinctly remember finding an old popsicle stick on the ground with some writing on it, and just wondering what it could possibly say. Was it a joke? Or the answer to the meaning of life? I was so fascinated by how different and mysterious China was that I brought home all kinds of weird knickknacks. KFC ketchup packets with 番茄酱written instead of ketchup. A packet of Aoliao instead of Oreos. Shortly after arriving back in the United States, I started high school. In the US, you're required in high school to take 2 years of a foreign language class. Most schools, especially in the area I grew up, offer Spanish and French. Some schools have German or maybe Latin. But it just so happened the year that I started at my high school, they were offering Mandarin Chinese for the first time. I jumped at the opportunity. Chinese class ended up being the only class where I would come home and be excited to do my homework. I remember printing off a paragraph of use the word in a sentence work and showing it to my parents saying, I can read that. The fascination with Chinese carried on throughout high school. I breezed past the required 2 years and took it all 4 years. By the time I graduated, I could speak pretty much no Chinese. I knew tons of words, I could make sentences, but put me next to a native speaker and we were speaking English. I still had every intention of being fluent in Chinese, however, so with my parents' help, we discovered Rotary International, an exchange student and business development organization that would send kids to host families in virtually any country for a year. Only one catch. China was not one of the options. There was, however, a choice to go to another Mandarin-speaking part of the world, one that, at the time, I knew very little about, to the point where I had to look it up in order to find out what language they speak. It was a small island off the coast of China, called Taiwan. Now here's where I have to make a bit of a side note. I have a lot to say on the Taiwan-China situation concerning the One China policy, but I'm going to save that for another episode. For now, I'll stick with this story where I spent the next year in Taiwan, living with host families and learning Chinese. When I left for Taiwan, my mom told me not to waste the year and make sure that I study a lot, because language learning does not come through osmosis. While she's right, being fully immersed in a language tends to force you to learn to speak it because you don't have another option. This is what I expected would be the case for me. Unfortunately, since Rotary International is a business development organization, it tends to mean that the people who are part of it are well versed in speaking English. This meant that my host families all spoke English very fluently, making my plan to be completely immersed a complete failure. By the time I left Taiwan, my Chinese was good enough to understand the topic of a conversation and to express myself in simple terms. But other than that, my Chinese was still garbage. So to continue my journey, I decided that I would study Chinese alongside my other main passion of video making. I found a university that had both programs and went there. So you can imagine my frustration when I found out that Chinese classes were canceled due to having no professor. My second year at the school, they did manage to find a Chinese professor, but they started from scratch with Chinese 101. I took the class anyway. And so did every Chinese international student at the school. So my Chinese consisted of 3 white people who had previously learned some Chinese before, 3 beginners, and 25 native Chinese students who were taking the class for an easy credit. The teacher taught right down the middle. Too hard for the beginners, too easy for the Chinese students. Good for me, though. The next year I took Chinese 102, and that year the professor informed me that I should absolutely apply for the China Scholarship Council's program to study in China for free. Believing it to be too good to be true, I applied anyway, and the next year I was studying at the best university in Shanghai, top 3 in China, for free. Actually, they even paid me. I got a monthly stipend of 3,000 RMB, or $450, and free housing and tuition. There's a lot that I want to talk about that happened during that year, including meeting the woman that I'm now married to. But I'll leave that for another episode. It was during the next 2 years I spent in China where my Chinese finally got to a level where I felt that I could comfortably communicate. Thanks to my wife, girlfriend at the time, I was introduced to aspects of Chinese culture in a way that I never could have experienced on my own. There are several videos on my YouTube channel which take place in her hometown, Jieyang, if you want to take a look. During these 2 years, I recorded countless hours of footage of things that captured my attention. The mysterious, awe-inspiring world that I had stepped into when I was 13 was starting to feel comfortable and familiar to me, and I wanted to capture it on video. But I never really knew what to do with all the footage that I had gathered. I literally filled up dozens of hard drives with footage that I would label "Going Around at Wujiaotang" or "Zhongshan Park Day." It was all footage that I wanted to share with people and show them just how cool China is, but just felt pointless to upload on its own. Who's going to watch a video called "Going Around Someplace" that consists of 8-second clips of things that I happen to think were cool? I would spend day after day telling stories about things I did and saw to my family, and my brother would say, "You should make a video." I would proceed to say, "Yeah, I should," and then never do it. Until one day, I went to Walmart in Shanghai and decided this is going to be the first video. It was a topic concise and easy for me to put together, and in the same way the KFC ketchup packets were so interesting to me at 13, the Shanghai Walmart captured my attention. It was so cool to me that something as ordinary as a Walmart could be so completely different in China, while still being the same thing. The Walmart sold live animals and shrimp chips. They left meat out in the open on beds of ice instead of refrigerated packages. And they sold Lay's potato chips in flavors like Mexican tomato chicken flavor. So on March 22nd of 2017, I uploaded Walmart in Shanghai to my audience of 0 people. I showed it to my brother, he laughed, and then I proceeded to get another 6 views. I also uploaded a couple of montages that I had made from trips to various cities, all of which got no views. Then I stopped trying. I didn't stop making videos, but I stopped trying to do YouTube. I didn't have any ideas that would allow me to consistently update my channel, making it feel not even worth trying. Then I discovered iDubbbz. If you don't know who iDubbbz is, he's a YouTuber who makes videos about stuff. For example, one of his videos is him looking at a container of nuts that he purchased that says, "Contains less than 50% peanuts," and checking to see if it actually contains less than 50% peanuts. Another video is a documentary about an extraordinarily obese YouTuber by the name of Airsoft Fatty. iDubbbz was the first YouTuber I saw who didn't have a niche. He just made videos about stuff he wanted to make videos about, and did it in an entertaining way and was successful at it. He built his audience around people who like him for him, and it didn't matter what kind of content he put out. One series that iDubbbz made that really helped his channel take off was called Kickstarter Crap, where he would go on Kickstarter, find ridiculous projects that couldn't possibly be funded, and critique them. He had dozens of videos on this single topic, and they were all exceptionally funny. That gave me an idea. In China, Amazon is not a popular marketplace because most people use Taobao. The difference between Taobao and Amazon is that because China has all the manufacturing, the number of products and services available is nearly infinite. My idea was to look for the most garbage, silly products that I could find and do what iDubbbz did. I'd call it Taobao Trash. I recorded my first video, edited it, decided it sucked, never uploaded it, and dusted my hands of it. The next year, I graduated university. By this point, I knew full well what my plan was, that I was going to graduate and go right back to China and find a job. I graduated with a degree in multimedia production and figured it would be easy for me to find a job doing that in China. What I didn't know was that the Chinese work visa system is based on a point system. If you have enough points, you get the visa. If not, you're out of luck unless you're famous. The points are awarded based on various factors such as your age, Chinese ability, what city you plan to work in, and your working experience. What I didn't know at the time was that working experience is defined as professional working experience that takes place at a normal 9-to-5 job that took place after graduating from college. That meant none of my freelance video work that I had done over the last several years, including in Shanghai, counted as working experience in their eyes, and my points added up to 58 out of 60. No China for me. That is, unless I was willing to teach English. China has an extreme shortage, especially post-COVID, of native English teachers. So they're willing to give extra visa points if you're a native speaker and will teach English. I had no interest in teaching English. I had just spent 4 years getting a degree in cinema and television arts, and that's what I wanted to do. Believe me, I tried to slip through the cracks. I applied to a bunch of different jobs, citing my past freelancing experience as my work experience, getting recommendation letters from previous clients. But job after job, they told me the same thing. When did you graduate? Nope, sorry, we can't get you a visa. Come back in 2 years. I knew I could easily find a job to do for 2 years, but I was itching to get back to China. At this point, I had developed a connection to China. The food felt familiar, the people, the culture, not to mention my future wife was still there. So I decided, fine, I'll teach English. Now this is the point where I should mention, if you're listening to this and you have an interest in teaching English in China, you should absolutely reach out. I have plenty of advice and resources to get you going, and I would be very happy to help. Going into this, I had expectations of what it would be like, and let me tell you, the experience was nothing like those expectations. Could not have been further from what I expected. But let me also tell you, with complete sincerity, I am incredibly glad that I did it this way. Things could not have gone better. Well, assuming COVID never happened, I guess that would have been better. Later, I plan to talk a lot more about teaching English in China, but to get back on track, about a year into teaching in Shenzhen, the technology city across the bridge from Hong Kong, I stumbled upon the episode of Taobao Trash that I had filmed 2 years earlier and gave it a watch. It was at that point that I had a sudden wave of inspiration. Not only did I make myself laugh on several occasions, it was clear to me that the last 2 years of growing up and working on other video projects, such as my Chinese TikTok account, which had accumulated 400,000 followers at that point, had greatly improved my video making ability. The flaws in that first Taobao Trash video stood out like night and day, but I could tell that there was a good video in there. After a re-edit, cropping out around 7 minutes of boring, and I wanted to make another one. Short-form content was just not what I was excited about, and YouTube was always much preferable to me over short-form platforms. At the same time, I had several ideas for other videos I could make. For example, sifting through my hundreds of hours of footage from the time in Shanghai to find clips of when bike sharing started, to make Bike Share BS, a story about China's bike share disaster. I also tried out some teaching Chinese videos. I suddenly didn't care that the videos I was uploading weren't getting any views. What I cared about was the same thing that I cared about as an 11-year-old kid, the excitement of going back and watching what I had made. It was at this point I decided to name my channel Welcome to China. For me, that was a significant phrase. Welcome to China had the obvious meaning of this channel is about China, but it also had an underlying significance. During the 2008 Olympics in Beijing, China was very vocal about its desire to have a good relationship with the rest of the world. They made sure everyone in China knew those 3 English words. Welcome to China. For years after 2008, anytime you'd meet someone in China who knew no English, you could be sure that they'd at least know how to welcome you to China. I liked this. I thought it was a cool, positive idea. And I wanted my channel to be that. I thought it was a cool, positive idea, which is exactly what I wanted to portray through my channel. I wanted to present China to an audience of people that was open-minded enough to recognize that mainstream media is unfairly anti-China. Everything related to China on YouTube seems to be either extremely negative or ass-kissingly positive. And that annoyed me. There's so much to China that's not politics related, and discussing politics seems to be just a preaching to the choir type of thing. Nothing changes and everyone leaves angry. I wanted my channel to be a place where I could make videos about things I was interested in, things related to my life in China, and things that have the atmosphere of welcome to China, not look what China did. At the same time, I found myself in a discussion with a friend of mine back in the States about the state of a startup coffee chain called Luckin Coffee. For those of you who don't know, Luckin Coffee is a coffee chain started by a guy named Lu Zhengyao, and his goal was to explode his way into the growing coffee market in China. Prior to Luckin Coffee, Starbucks was well established in China, but coffee culture in general was not. Starbucks was a cool place to hang out at the mall, but getting a coffee was not something on most people's minds. Luckin Coffee changed that. Their focus was offering coffee for super, super, super cheap. Like free kind of cheap. Luckin Coffee brought in customers by offering a free coffee to first-time customers, and successive coffees were just over $1. They kept this up for a while, opening hundreds of stores at insane speed, before it came to light that the company was lying about their sales numbers. Their stock went down from $50 to close to $0, and everyone who'd heard about it in the West had assumed that they'd failed. Bloomberg even wrote an article titled, "Luckin Coffee Failed, but Cheese-Flavored Teas Are Coming." This article pissed me off for 2 reasons. One, because cheese teas were a thing long before this and were definitely not newly popular. But second, they claimed Luckin Coffee had failed, but I was still watching it succeed firsthand. Store after store with people coming in and out collecting drinks. I figured this was a chance to make some money on their stock. I kept talking to my friend about it and explaining why I thought they would do well, and he would respond with his skepticism based on what he'd read. So finally, I decided I'd make a video about it. I had no idea at the time that there was a significant group of people waiting to see this video. But the next morning I woke up to my first video with over 1,000 views. This was the first time that I realized I could actually do it. Make videos about things that I'm personally interested in, and there would be an audience that wanted to watch it. So why not keep going? I made videos about Neo, the origins of kombucha, moving to China, trains, COVID-0, the Chinese coffee market, all in my free time while teaching English as my main job. This went on for 2 more years until COVID-0 started to become a problem. China had adapted a strategy of keeping COVID cases to an absolute 0. And as soon as cases broke out, they would shut down everything again until it was back to 0 cases. Daily testing had become mandatory, and leaving the country meant a minimum 14-day quarantine upon arrival back in the country, at your expense. It had been 3 years since I'd been home to see my family, and my mom informed me that she was going to be getting a hip replacement. I didn't even know she was having hip trouble. This hit me hard, because what I had initially planned was to see my parents at least once or twice a year, but now here I was, 3 years in, having seen them 0 times a year. Month after month, I had started to wonder when I would see my family again. Then I find out my mom is getting this major surgery. Almost as if by fate, as I began planning to go back to the States to be with my family, China suddenly deleted COVID-0. I know that might sound like a weird choice in words, but that's literally what happened. As if overnight, they deleted all the insane draconian restrictions and everything went back to normal. It was so bizarre that I absolutely plan on making a video about it in the future. But it was at this point that I had to take an early exit from the school year in Shenzhen in order to come home and help my mom. I had never expected to get so attached to teaching and to the students in my classes. I still remember the day I left, where the 7-year-old students were confused why they were suddenly getting a new teacher. It was also at this point that I began to have second thoughts about the name of my channel. While my fascination with China is as strong as ever, I realized that my channel was based on me being in China, and that kind of prevented me from ever leaving, or from making any content that's not related to China. The channel is supposed to be my thoughts and musings about the things I'm interested in, what I experience, and how I interpret those experiences. And while a lot of those things I'm interested in relate to China in some way, the channel itself is me. And for the first time, I felt like my ideas were actually worth sharing. So that's why I changed the name of the channel to just my own name. I added a "the" to the beginning, though, to separate myself from any other James Corwin, since it's a really popular name, apparently. At this point, I've reached a consistency where I know that I won't stop uploading to this channel. It's not something that I feel obligated to do, it's something that I genuinely look forward to work on every day. I find myself constantly saying, I should make a video about that, and wishing that there were more hours in the day to make it. This channel seems to be the only thing that I consistently never get bored of. I enjoy video games, running, rock climbing, Rubik's Cubes, but all of those things come and go in terms of my desire to do them. Yet I have so many things that I want to talk about, say, and complain about, and I can see my audience continuing to grow as I upload. So at this point, I finally feel like it makes sense to start this podcast. It gives me a format to talk about things in long form without having to worry about editing or gathering footage. I wasn't kidding about my hours upon hours of footage. It's legit one of my biggest issues. I bought a 4 terabyte MacBook to edit on, and it's always full. I have a 10 terabyte NAS that's almost full, and I have about 12 external hard drives that all contain backups of various footage. It's gotten to the point where the stuff that I shot in 2015 shows things that were either torn down or otherwise don't exist anymore. My collection has become archival footage, and I can't bring myself to delete anything. If for whatever reason you've gotten this far into the podcast, thanks for listening. I honestly can't tell you how cool it is to know that you felt that it was worth listening to. If you would consider supporting this podcast/YouTube channel by either joining the channel on YouTube or sending what they call a super thanks, which is essentially a one-time donation, it would really help me pay for the data storage, and I would be endlessly thankful. Anyway, thanks again for listening. You now know who I am, and you can expect to hear a lot more from me in the future.